Once there was a young lady named Dorothy. Dorothy was a gal that got along well in school and had quite a few friends. She was a likable gal, but not overly popular. She wasn't a stunner, but not just an average looker either. She had thick brown hair around shoulder length and soft green eyes. One day she met a man by the name of Duke. He was 4 years her senior. He was a good-looking young man with dirty blonde-colored hair and soulful brown eyes. Dorothy had seen Duke around town, but had never talked to him before. They met walking past each other on the street. Duke had noticed Dorothy around town, but never had the courage to speak to her. He finally built up the courage to say something to Dorothy. He stopped her on the street and asked her name, even though he already knew it. She told him her name, and in turn asked for his. Duke asked Dorothy if she would like to go out sometime, like a picnic or a walk in the park. Dorothy accepted his offer, and they met the following day at the same corner after Dorothy was out of school. Together, Duke and Dorothy walked together in the park, while Duke carried the picnic basket that he had prepared for that afternoon. As they walked, they asked each other routine questions and found out more about each other as they went along. They talked together for hours, until Dorothy realized what time it was and realized that she needed to be home soon, or else her mother and father would scold her and she would not be able to see Duke again. Duke offered to walk Dorothy home, but she insisted that he would not because her parents wouldn't allow it. So Duke walked Dorothy back to their corner, and Duke kissed Dorothy's hand goodbye. Luckily, when Dorothy arrived home, she received no such punishment. Luckily, when Dorothy arrived home, she received no such punishments as she had feared. For the next few weeks, Dorothy and Duke met on the same corner at the same time on the same day. When Duke saw that things were becoming more serious between him and Dorothy, he started to take her to more than just the park. At first, Dorothy was hesitant about this because she was afraid that one of her mother's friends would see them out together and tell her mother about Duke, which she had not said a word about. At first, Dorothy and Duke were fine going out places together, but one night when they attended the theater, one of Dorothy's classmates saw her with Duke. Dorothy didn't think it a problem until she arrived home that night to her mother and father outraged by the idea of Dorothy courting Duke. They forbid Dorothy to see Duke ever again. Dorothy was very upset by this and didn't know what to do. Of course, she felt she had gone too far with already deceiving her parents, so she saw to it that she stopped dating Duke. Dorothy did not want to just cut Duke off, so she got one of her class friends, Marisol, to deliver the note to Duke. In the letter, she told Duke what had happened and that she could not see him again, and goodbye. Duke had really grown to liking Dorothy and was devastated by this news. Duke was not ready to let go of Dorothy, so he thought up a plan to keep in contact with her. Duke wrote a letter back to Dorothy explaining his feelings and that he wasn't about to just give up on them because her parents forbid it. And at the end of the letter, Duke wrote, "I love you, Dora." Dora was the name Duke had come to call Dorothy, and oh, how she adored it. Duke gave the letter he had written to Marisol to give to Dorothy. At first, Marisol was uneasy about taking the letter to Dorothy, but Duke was able to convince her by telling her that he couldn't live without Dorothy and that he loved her. So Marisol gave in and passed the letter on to Dorothy. At first, Dorothy did not want to read or accept the letter because she did not want to defy her parents any longer. Plus, she had already started seeing another boy, by the name of Paul, with whom she had class with. Her mother had set her up with him. She only said yes to please her mother and to hopefully make up for what she had done. Dorothy accepted the letter from Marisol after Marisol had told her how urgent it was that she read it. Dorothy kept it with her that day, not reading it until she got home that evening after seeing Paul. When she finally opened and read the letter, she was shocked by the emotion that Duke had put into it. She then realized that she loved Duke too much to give up on their love. She then rushed and wrote back to him that she neither wanted to give up on the relationship that they had started. She wrote to him about Paul and that she wouldn't be able to see him in person for a while, and that corresponding between letters would be all that they could do. So Dorothy rushed to Marisol the next morning, asking her to help in delivering these letters between her and Duke. Marisol agreed as long as Paul could set her up with his best friend, Henry. Dorothy agreed to the terms and sent Marisol off with the letter. Duke received the letter from Dorothy and agreed to the terms at which they could only communicate through letters for now. Every week For the next year, Dorothy and Duke would send each other letters using Marisol as the messenger, considering that Marisol went on a double date with Henry, Paul, and Dorothy. Dorothy felt really bad about deceiving Paul, but she knew that true love would conquer all. One day, Dorothy received a letter from Duke saying that he had been enlisted in the army and that he would be sent overseas to fight in the war. World War I. Dorothy was distraught by this news and was saddened by her fear of her lover possibly leaving forever. In the letter, he also mentioned that he desperately needed to see her before he was shipped off. She agreed and wrote to him that she could meet him on the corner that following day after their usual exchange. Duke was thrilled by this news because he would finally be able to see the woman he cared for and be able to hold her close like he had imagined all that time. He also had plans to propose to Dorothy. The day had finally come that Duke and Dorothy would be reunited on that fateful street corner. When Dorothy saw Duke on that corner, she leapt into his arms and he held her tighter than ever. He gently kissed her forehead, and after he set her down. It was then that they walked to the same park, to the same place, as they always had met when they arrived there. Duke got down on one knee and held on... It was then that they walked to the same park, to the same place as they had always met. When they arrived there, Duke got on one knee and held out a necklace for Dorothy and asked her, "Dora, would you marry me?" Dorothy was overcome by emotion and said yes, without caring about the possible consequences to come. The necklace was a wevelier with a delicate gold chain with a diamond filigree setting. Duke had saved up a great sum of his money to buy Dorothy the necklace. Duke gave her the necklace as opposed to a ring so that their engagement would be kept a secret. Even Marisol was unaware of their engagement. When Paul asked where the necklace had come from, Dorothy told him that it was a recently discovered family heirloom. Duke and Dorothy agreed to keep sending each other letters when Duke was off fighting in the war. They would write to each other every day. They decided that if Duke were to make it back home alive, then they would go through with the marriage, regardless of her parents' dismay. So as time went on, Dorothy prayed every day that Duke would be safely sent back home to her. About a year after Duke had left, Paul also decided to fight for his country and left Dorothy as well. She told Paul a week before he announced that he was leaving what had been going on while they were dating. Paul was devastated, but he knew that Dorothy had not been as in love with him as he had been with her. When he shipped out, Dorothy still wrote letters to him, but not as frequently as she did with Duke. Dorothy impatiently waited for Duke to send news that he would be coming home. One day she finally received a fateful letter. Duke had sent her a letter saying that he would be home in 2 months. Dorothy was so excited by this news that she couldn't wait any longer. So she finally built up the courage to tell her parents that her and Duke were going to get married, and that there was nothing they could do about it. Her parents still did not approve, but allowed her to do as she wished. When Duke finally arrived home after those 2 excruciatingly long 2 months, Dorothy was relieved. The day Duke arrived home, Dorothy met him on their special street corner. Duke ran to Dorothy and dipped her down into a long, never-ending kiss. They held on to each other for what seemed like minutes on end. On July 2nd, 1919, Dorothy married Duke Powell in Uniontown, Pennsylvania.